Good evening. I'm Jonathan Higgins,
And I'm Mike Edwards.
and welcome to Train Aficionado. In this edition, we are talking to Mike, the Director of Railroad Operations for the State of California's Railroad Museum.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So, tell us a little bit about the museum for those of the audience that haven't been there.
Well, the California State Railroad Museum is operated in Sacramento, California, here in our capital. It's a partnership with California Parks or Department of Parks and Recreations. And so California State Parks runs the museum. And additionally, we also have another partner, which is the California State Railroad Museum Foundation. And the foundation is a nonprofit group that helps to subsidize operational needs of the museum, both in the History Museum with our exhibits and our interpretation, as well as the operation of our excursion train, which is the Sacramento Southern Railroad. And so in concert, we have basically two primary venues, one being the History Museum, where most everything is static display, where we have specific artifacts of interest, and the Sacramento Southern Railroad, which is actually our operating railroad, where we have a 4-mile excursion trip that runs up and down the Sacramento River between downtown Sacramento and our final station called Sutterville, which is about 4 miles to the south. And all of this is located in what is called the Old Sacramento Historic District, which, in addition to the museum and the railroad, Old Sacramento is an entire tourist district that has shopping, dining, other museums. The Sacramento History Museum is right next door. The Delta King ferry boat, paddle wheeler, is also right nearby. So there's a lot of activities literally just a few feet away from all that. So it's all encompassed all together in the Old Sacramento Historical District.
That is super cool. I was looking at it. So I see that's a older right of way that you guys are traveling on. Now, do you guys just own just the 4 miles of it? I noticed that eventually it gets kind of, it looks like it's no longer used after a certain point.
Correct. There originally, it was part of the Southern Pacific. It was a subsidiary of the Southern Pacific called the Sacramento Southern, and it actually ran all the way down to a place called Isleton, which is all the way down south by the Sacramento Delta. And then over time, it was shortened. It ran about 14 miles down to the very south end of Sacramento at a location called Hood. And the tracks are still in place. However, when the Railroad Museum started operations in the early 1980s, we chose just to go about 3 miles. The southernmost station is called Baths, and at that location is where we do the runaround, and then we come back. And part of that was based on, as an excursion railroad and the type that we operate, mostly it's oriented for a quick interpretive experience, for the family. So children, mom, dad, everybody. So therefore, it's relatively quick. So we don't really do any long distance type trains or anything. So we really don't have a need for the mileage. And as you know, additional mileage comes with additional maintenance costs and expenses. And so while there is more track available, we find that the 3.5 to 4 miles that we utilize meets all of our needs and fits within our scope really, really well. The track further to the south is still there. It's owned by California State Parks. It kind of sits there quietly. It does have a lot of historical significance, but at this point, we don't have any plans to begin operations over it. But you never know. Plans always change.
That's for sure. Now, how did you get involved with the museum? Are you a rail fan, or do you have a history with the railroads? Or
My railroad career started as a volunteer, but not at this railroad museum. I started volunteering at the Pacific Southwest Railway Museum, which is located in East County of San Diego, based out of Campo, California. And so I was born and raised in San Diego, and that's where I discovered my interest in trains, and I began volunteering at that railroad museum. And from there, that morphed into a professional career. I hired out with the local short line there in San Diego. And through my travels and experiences, eventually made my way to Sacramento and hired on with what became the Sierra Northern Railway, which is a short line here in the Sacramento area. And stayed with them for many years, then went on to Amtrak here out of the Bay Area and continued with that. And then, so I had an association with the California State Railroad Museum my entire time that I was here at SAC. I had met people and had friends and others. And so through those relationships, this opportunity as the director of railroad operations came about. And so with my skill set and some changes that needed to be implemented, it created the perfect opportunity to join the team. And it's nice at this stage of one's career, the high speed chaos of Amtrak and all that it entails in managing large railroads that run 24/7, 7 days a week. It's a nice treat to be on a small railroad and a little bit more simple. And so at this time in my life, I find it's a really nice fit. And in all my travels, both with the Class 1 railroads, with the short lines, this type is my favorite. The tourist railroads, I enjoy working with the old equipment. I enjoy sharing the experience with our passengers and delivering the interpretive experience the way that we want to do it. So it's a really, really fun place to be. And of course, California State Railroad Museum, has an excellent reputation in the museum industry, especially with regard to railroads. And it's great to be a part of this team. I love being up here and I love the people that we work with. And it's turned out to work out really well.
So tell us about some of the exhibits that you would see at the museum, and what one is probably one of your favorites?
Oh, that's a good question. Inside the History Museum, most of our focus is obviously the building and the construction and the completion of the Transcontinental Railroad, with a specific focus over the route over Donner Pass. So from its origination point here at K Street in Sacramento, which is just literally outside my office window. So my office, we call this holy ground. And so our focus is on the building of the Transcontinental Railroad, specifically over Donner Pass. So we have a lot of our artifacts that are there are oriented around that or basis. We have the CP Huntington, which is the first steam locomotive that the Southern Pacific had, which it's restored and available to look at. And then, of course, we also have the only remaining Southern Pacific cab forward locomotive, which is complete and is on display. You have opportunities to visit the cab and see all the components of the cab, both on the fireman side and the engineer side, extremely up close and personal. And that's one of the highlights of what we have. We also have some other Central Pacific equipment and some other things. Concurrently, just this last week, due to a large event that's happening in Carson City, Nevada, some of our unique pieces were actually trucked over to Carson City, and they're going to be visiting that museum on a 2-year loan. And in return, we have a few pieces that are coming from there that will be arriving at our museum next week. One is a locomotive called the Dayton, and the other one is a coach car. And I can't remember the exact number, but as far as records indicate, this is the last surviving coach car that was present at Promontory when the Gold Spike was driven. So it's a crucial element to our interpretive mission and what we like to share. Lots of other things. We have a Canadian National sleeping car, which is a very unique experience. One of our more popular experiences. The car actually has a mechanism in it that when you're on board, it will wiggle and jiggle and shake just like you're going down the track at speed. And it has all the sounds and the smells of being on a sleeper car in the middle of the night. It's a wonderful, wonderful display of that process and how that happens. We have a Great Northern RPO car, and as well as our Santa Fe Super Chief diner car, the Cochiti, which demonstrates everything with regard to on being on board the diner car and all the services that excluded as well. And then we have 3 open stalls in our roundhouse, and we primarily use those as rotating exhibits. That's one of the nice things about the museum, is that Many of our pieces are somewhat permanent. However, we do have the opportunity for mobilization. So we can bring new equipment in periodically, we can take it out, we can trade equipment. So we have a lot more that stays over at the old Southern Pacific shops that comes in periodically for either display or interpretive issues or events, things of that nature as well. As far as my favorite piece, that's a tough question. I don't know. I'm a fan of our diesel fleet. We have a unique diesel fleet. In particular, we have one of the last remaining Santa Fe war bonnets, the ATSF 347C. The locomotive currently doesn't run. Our long-term plans are eventually to restore it to full service. However, we do use it occasionally for static displays. We do use it actually on the railroad. It doesn't run, so it either has to be pushed or pulled, but we do like to take it out and show it off. It still has its original war bonnet paint, which looks beautiful under the California sun. So that's definitely it. It's hard to pick. It's kind of like your children. It's hard to pick a favorite, but that one is definitely high on my list for sure.
Yeah, I mean, it just is amazing, just be able to have that rotating displays. Now, from what I understand, you also have digital exhibits for people that are not able to come out to the museum. Is this something that came about when COVID kind of took up so people could actually virtually visit the museum?
Yeah, it had been talked about for years, and it had kind of been one of those things that we had dreamed about and thought how neat it would be. But obviously, COVID kind of forced our hand, and the results worked out really, really well. So yeah, our curatorial staff has added a tremendous amount of uh, virtual exhibits, both online and even here at the museum as well. Lots of virtual exhibits have been added. A lot of interpretive exhibits have been added, where you can still see a lot of the museum and not necessarily have to maneuver as much. Caters much more to those with ADA restrictions and other things. So we really kind of opened up a whole new caveat to the way that we can interpret and tell our story, which is really, really good. And a lot of progress has been made in the last year or two, specifically in that regard.
So tell me a little bit about the excursions. Do you offer any special excursions throughout the year? I know a lot of museums will offer something during winter time for an excursion like that.
Yeah, we do. So our regular excursions is the River City Limited, and we run typically on Saturdays and Sundays with 5 trains a day. It's about an hour round trip. Again, it just goes down about 3.5 miles. We do a run around. We have a little bit more trackage to use after that, and then we bring the train home. Those are typically, we use our 1920s SP commuter cars, as well as we have some converted gondola cars for open air. We also have a first class service on that train. We have a 1920s private car that we use, and we also have some Streamliner SP cars, a diner and a lounge car that can be utilized. And those have onboard air conditioning. And so in the summer Sacramento heat, those become very popular cars.
I'm
But
sure.
that's typically what we use in our regular excursion fleet. We also cater to charters, special events, things like that, as needed, depending on what the need is. But we can accommodate just about any event or anything that would either include a train ride or something as simple as just having a train in the background of one's event. California State Parks, the whole museum area we have a lot of property on site that can be used for various events as well. We do specials for the Halloween season. And of course, our biggest comes Christmas time, and we do run the Polar Express. That is our biggest fundraiser. That is also our largest scale event. For us, Christmas time is what we call all hands on deck. It takes an army to pull that off, but we have an amazing group of dedicated volunteers, an amazing group of staff who all come in to make that happen and to make wonderful experiences for countless families. So the Polar Express is definitely our pride and joy, while at the same time that's kind of our nemesis in a way, because in January, we all sit down and relax and we think, oh, good, we have a rest for a year.
Yeah.
And it seems as though we blink our eyes and here comes December again and we're right back at it. But we really love doing it. We love sharing it with the public. It's definitely one of the highlights of our annual operation.
So you mentioned something about a Halloween event. Tell us a little bit more about that.
We utilize the train. All kinds of haunted hijinks are on board. Everything from a mad scientist to all kinds of other we've seen everybody, and the kids love it. You never know who's going to show up. It's either Superman or it's Batman. Spider-Man's made an appearance. You name it, they're all here. The mad scientist is in there. There's some pretty scary looking creatures running around. There's some beautiful fairies, beautiful princesses. It's the whole mix. And the best part is the candy is flowing. So there is candy everywhere. It's a great time for mom, dad, and the kids. Everybody enjoys it. Usually every day is a little bit different, but they have a great program that's well designed for families and to enjoy the Halloween time. So it's a lot of fun that we do.
So you mentioned about fundraising. So what other ways can the public support the museum?
Well, the California State Railroad Museum, also being a member, you can contact the California State Railroad Museum Foundation and for your memberships. And that's a huge way that we get income. And again, that income is used for our staffing needs, as well as those are monies that we use for running the operation. So for, again, something is like the Polar Express, the Halloween trains, the River City Limited, and that goes to just about every component of running the railroad. Something as simple as buying the fuel, whereas also we can use that money for vital things that are needed inside the History Museum. For example, right now we're doing a huge remodel on the lobby, our main entrance to the lobby. And so funding that has come from various donors and from the foundation has been able to help support that remodel. We had an ADA lift a couple of years ago that we were able to fund that was put in so that now those with ADA have access to the RPO car. So now we have a lift in place that they can get up and get access to see the inside of the RPO car and some other things. So those funds cover a wide gamut of things that support the museum and to help us to keep not only the trains running, but keep the doors open at the museum and keep improving the exhibits. The virtual exhibits that we talked about earlier, same thing. All of your donations, the time, and all of the funding goes in to support those things.
It seems like an awesome operation. I'm really looking forward to making a trip out west to be able to see the museum and definitely take one of those rides along the river. I mean, it looks like a beautiful ride, along the river there. And I'm sure, great things are certainly coming. Anything in restoration projects right now that you're currently working on?
There's always stuff. We have a small 060 tank engine, the Granite Rock number 10, which is what we primarily use for when we run steam. Granite Rock 10, it's a small scale locomotive. It works for our type of railroad, given the type of territory. And also most tourist railroads, have a more traditional, whether it's a Mikado or something with a tender, whereas we're actually kind of unique in that sense that it's not many that you have, we get to interpret and show off, a real small engine that was built initially as an industry switcher. And that's kind of a neat component that we have. We do have other projects in line. There's, like with every museum organization, regardless of its size, everyone has that dream list. And we have all those beautiful artifacts, and we all would like to see them come to life, and we would like to see all of them be restored and used. But as you know, that takes a lot of time, money, and energy. And so we do have some things that we're planning for, but everything is it takes time, and it takes strategy, and it takes planning. And so I can say the things that we're interested in moving on soon. We're very interested in getting our Santa Fe War Bonnet, the 347C, up and running. We also have Santa Fe steam locomotive number 1010. that has some famous California history with regard to the race, the Death Valley Scotty race, and some other things. We would love to see that up and moving. We have Southern Pacific tunnel motor, which we're real anxious to get that going. And we have a lot of other things that we like to show off. But again, priorities and obviously each individual piece has a different requirement for what it takes to bring it back to life or to get it running again. And so we have to look at those things, and it's kind of a case by case. But our long-term goals and our long-term objectives are to try to get as much running as we can. I've often said, we have a lot of toys back there in that shop, and we want to pull them out and we want to share them with the world. And that's one of the primary goals of the foundation, is to support that so that we can do that. They all have a story to tell. They all deserve to be seen, and they all deserve to be shared. And that is our mission, is to find a way to make that happen. And slow but steadily, that's we're hoping to get there.
Awesome. That is certainly awesome. I just want to thank you so much for spending a few moments with us, telling us about the museum. I'm certainly looking forward to going out to the West Coast and definitely paying the museum a visit.
We'd love to have you. It'd be wonderful.
Well, thank you very much, Mike, for joining us on Train Aficionado. Appreciate it. If you have anything that you want to announce in the future, you're more than welcome to come back on the show and share it with us. We'd love to share the news.
Oh, that's wonderful. Thank you so much for having me. I had a great time.